Thomas story. Join the conversation with your phone calls, Facebook comments, text messages, and tweets. Washington Journal starts now.
This is the Washington Journal for April 5th. President Biden issued a call for investigations of Russian President Vladimir Putin, considering situations and reporting out of Bucha. He describing it as a war crime. He and other world leaders insisting on a response involving more sanctions. Ukrainian President Zelensky will appear before the United Nations Security Council to talk about the atrocities documented over the last couple of days. When it comes to the situation in Bucha and what is coming out of there, for our next half hour before our first guest, we want to get you to respond to how the U.S. and NATO should respond in light of those Russian atrocities in Ukraine. 202-748-8000 for those of you in the Eastern and Central time zone. 202-748-8001 for the Mountain and Pacific time zones. And if you want to text us your thoughts this morning, 202-748-8003. You can post on our social media sites at Facebook and Twitter. You can also follow the show on Instagram. A photograph in the Washington Post this morning under the headline from President Biden making these statements yesterday when it comes to the issue of Bucha, also in that reporting near Kyiv. He calling it a war crime, or at least should be looked at as a war crime. Here is the president on yesterday responding.
You may remember I got criticized for calling Putin a war criminal. Well, the truth of the matter, you saw what happened in Bucha. This warrants him, he is a war criminal. But we have to gather the information. We have to continue to provide Ukraine with the weapons they need to continue the fight. And we have to gather all the detail so this can be have a war crime trial. This guy is brutal. And what's happening in Bucha is outrageous. And everyone's seen it. Up to Allah. No, I think it is a war crime.
But you about it, sir, are you going to do more sanctions on Russia?
I'm seeking more sanctions, yes. I'll have time to announce that to you.
That's President Biden from yesterday responding to from coming back from his weekend in Delaware. NBC reporting that the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky will address the United Nations Security Council today as Russia faces growing condemnation over those alleged atrocities in Bucha. He said on Monday at least 300 people had been killed and tortured by Russian forces there near Kyiv before troops pulled out of the besieged town. When it comes to that Security Council meeting, you can see that and follow along with that on cspan.org and our app C-SPAN Now. When it comes to several other speakers addressing the Security Council, including President Zelensky. One of the people also responding yesterday from the State Department was Jake Sullivan, or from the White House was Jake Sullivan. As far as the national security issues, we'll show you that in a bit. Again, you also could take a look at issues concerning the defense budget today. You'll see two of the top leaders at the Defense Department there, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin and Brigadier General Mark Milley, talking about issues of defense, but also will probably address the issues coming out of Ukraine as well. You can see that live at 9:30 this morning on C-SPAN 3, cspan.org, also our C-SPAN Now app. Again, Jake Sullivan, the National Security Advisor at the White House, talking about the issues and what's expected in the following days when it comes to investigating it.
The Ukrainian people, backed resolutely by the United States and other nations, have held firm. Kyiv and other cities still stand. The Ukrainian military has performed exceptionally well, and many Ukrainian civilians have joined local militias in addition to using nonviolent means to resist. Vladimir Putin also believed that the West would not hold together in support of Ukraine. Russia was surprised that President Biden and the United States were so effective in rallying the world to prepare for and respond to the invasion. And after President Biden reinforced and reinvigorated Western unity at a series of summits in Brussels just 11 days ago, the Russians have now realized that the West will not break. At this juncture, we believe that Russia is revising its war aims. Russia is repositioning its forces to concentrate its offensive operations in eastern and parts of southern Ukraine, rather than target most of the territory. All indications are that Russia will seek to surround and overwhelm Ukrainian forces in eastern Ukraine. We anticipate that Russian commanders are now executing their redeployment from northern Ukraine to the region around the Donbass in eastern Ukraine. Russian forces are already well on their way of retreating from Kyiv to Belarus, as Russia likely prepares to deploy dozens of additional battalion tactical groups, constituting tens of thousands of soldiers, to the front line in Ukraine's east.
So when it comes to the United States and NATO and a response, according to these atrocities that are being reported on, what should be the U.S. and NATO response? You can let us know again, 202-748-8000 for those of you in the Eastern and Central time zones, and 202-748-8001 for the Mountain and Pacific time zones. You can text us too at 202-748-8003. The responses from Congress this morning concerning the events of the last couple of days. Representative Jason Crow starts off from Democratic responses saying Ukrainians fight for freedom and democracy is a fight they must win. They can do it, but they'll need more support. He and his colleagues, Andy Kim of New Jersey and Representative Major also were asking for increased military support in Ukraine. He adding that this is a watershed moment in the battle for democracy and we must win. Representative Adam Smith, strong leaders uphold the rule of law and care about preserving human life. Weak leaders treat people with cruelty and ignore norms and principles. Russia's callous violence has exposed Vladimir Putin as a weak leader. He must be held accountable. Representative Frank Pallone of New Jersey saying the world is at an inflection point right now where we all must make a choice between democracy and autocracy. Putin thinks that he can bully Ukraine to get what he wants, but the United States and our Western allies will continue to stand together against his reign of terror. And Senator Jeff Merkley adding that these images coming out of Bucha and elsewhere in Ukraine are horrific. These gruesome war crimes cannot go unpunished. The mass graves must be investigated and Putin must be held accountable for the atrocities being committed by the Russian military. Again, to your thoughts as far as response is concerned from the United States and NATO. This is Tom in Lancaster, California, starting us off. Go ahead.
Well, let's look at the big picture. We had Hillary Clinton delivering yellow cake uranium to Russia so they could rebuild their nuclear.
Caller, we're going to stick to the topic at hand as far as these events. What do you think about the last couple of days, and then what should be the response?
Here's the big picture.
No, caller. Stick to the topic at hand, please.
Ukraine get attacked during the Biden-Obama administration. We had Mueller and Hillary State Department delivering yellow cake uranium.
Okay, we'll go. That's Tom there in California. You heard from some legislators, some of the Republicans responding to the events of the last couple of days. Senator Mitt Romney of Utah saying, we are witnessing through these horrifying images from Bucha more evidence that Russia has no concern for protecting civilians or human rights. Amid the war crimes and atrocities in Ukraine, the UN General must strip Russia of its position on the UN HRC.
All right, I'm gonna pop in. How do I do that? Hello, I'm in. It's me. It is I. Hello. Okay. What a fun little topic today. We have war crimes going on in Ukraine, and now we get to have some fun conversations about it and let everyone hear what the big picture is from all these conservatives who are clear experts on the topic. I'm gonna go to a thingy here. And hopefully it's April 4th. Yeah, okay, hopefully.
Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.
This is Amy Goodman. She's from Democracy Now! And is one of the best, it's one of the best anchors out there when it comes to telling you uncomfortable things about what's happening in real life really, really quickly. So we're gonna watch this, and she's gonna kind of give us a little bit on the a little bit of a scoop on the
Ukraine is accusing Russia of committing war crimes for killing civilians. Over the weekend, Ukraine regained full control of the Kyiv region after Russian troops retreated, leaving behind widespread devastation. A warning to our audience, some images of what happened may be disturbing. In the town of Bucha, dozens of dead bodies were found in the streets, some with their hands and feet bound. Ukrainian officials say they also believe hundreds more people have been buried in mass graves. This is Anatoly Fedoruk, the mayor of Bucha.
Corpses of executed people still line the Yabluska streets in Bucha. Their hands are tied behind their backs with white civilian rags. They were shot in the back of their heads. So you can imagine what kind of lawlessness they perpetrated here.
On Sunday, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said he was, quote, deeply shocked by the images from Bucha and called for an independent investigation. Ukraine has asked the International Criminal Court to visit Bucha to gather possible evidence of war crimes. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky also called on Western leaders to impose tougher sanctions in response. Russia's denied killing civilians and claimed the footage and photographs from Bucha are a, quote, stage performance by Kyiv. Meanwhile, on Sunday, Russia launched missile strikes from the sea and air, targeting an oil refinery and 3 fuel storage facilities in the southern port city of Odessa. In other developments, the United Nations says Russia's invasion, which is now in its 40th day, has displaced over 10.5 million people in Ukraine, with over 4.1 million fleeing the country. On Sunday, Pope Francis said he's willing to travel to Ukraine if it could help bring about peace. Lithuania has announced it's cut off imports of Russian gas, becoming the first country in the European Union to do so. The EU has pledged to reduce Russian gas imports by 2/3 by the end of the year. Meanwhile, the Washington Post reports 30% of the gas Russia sells to Europe is still going through pipelines located inside Ukraine. While Ukraine has urged European countries to cut off Russian gas imports, it's decided to allow Russia to keep using its pipelines. One Ukrainian official defended the decision, saying it provides a deterrent against more Russian bombing and destruction inside Ukraine. Russia to keep using it is still going through pipelines located. Meanwhile, the Washington Post reports 30% of the gas Russia sells to Europe is still going through pipelines located inside Ukraine. While Ukraine has urged European countries to cut off Russian gas imports, it's decided to allow Russia to keep using its pipelines. One Ukrainian official defended the decision, saying it provides a deterrent against more Russian bombing and destruction inside Ukraine. 2 more journalists have been killed while covering Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The Ukrainian military said the award-winning Lithuanian documentary maker Mantas Kvedaravičius was killed in a Russian attack while he was trying to leave Mariupol. He had spent years covering Ukraine and did a film about Mariupol. Meanwhile, the body of the Ukrainian photographer and videographer Maxim Levin was found on Saturday near Kyiv. He was a long-time contributor to Reuters and other news outlets, including the BBC and Associated Press. The United Nations has brokered a 2-month truce in Yemen, the site of the world's worst humanitarian crisis. The U.S.-backed Saudi-led coalition and Houthi rebels both agreed to halt all offensive operations inside Yemen and across its borders. Fuel ships are now being allowed to enter into Hodeidah ports, and the airport in Sana'a is reopening. Over the past 6 years, the UN estimates the war in Yemen has killed nearly 400,000 people, many from hunger. Residents in Yemen have welcomed the halt to the fighting.
We are very optimistic about the truce, but we suffer from a diet.
Okay, I think that's what she's gonna say about Ukraine. You know, as much as, like, how do I say this? As much as I want to make this about a, as much as I want to say that this is just some big cover-up or some big scheme or some big reset or whatever like that, there is just, like, people are not aware of like the material conditions and how this war is affecting the world. Like natural gas alone is becoming a very huge issue. Europe as a whole, which is a seed in the modern world, they are not well equipped. Their country doesn't. The continent of Europe is not well endowed with very much natural gas or oil, which is like the fuel of the modern world. Is the essential product that gets our modern technology going. Russia has some of the largest natural gas lines in the world and offers that to Europe. And even during this war, they still cannot turn off the pipelines. Like, they're beginning to, and as the war progresses and as things escalate, they're trying to become less and less dependent on Russia for natural gas. But the problem is they don't have the infrastructure to support anything outside of the pipelines they've already established between them and Russia. Which means that now, if they're trying to make a transition to any sort of other natural gas source, like liquid natural gas from the United States, for example, we're talking billions of dollars and years of development to rapidly create liquid natural gas stations that can properly convert the liquid gas into a gaseous form again. On top of that, Russia and Ukraine combined provide about they are like the leading fifth. They're like the top wheat provider in the world. Both of them combined, and provide like a fifth of wheat to the entire world. That's just like gone. Like, we are going to be seeing that's already because of this war, we're already going to be missing out on harvest season, and we're already back on the seasons because none of these farmers are. I mean, farmers in Russia are, but the farmers in Ukraine are on the field. They're fighting for their country. They can't really plant the wheat this year, so we are going to see in a matter of a month, we're going to start seeing huge disparities and food crises emerging in smaller countries, especially scattered around the Middle East and Northern Africa. This war affects the world. It really, really does. And it is changing our global landscape as we see it, and it might permanently change it forever. Anyway, let's go back to C-SPAN.
This is Brian Fitzpatrick, Representative Brian Fitzpatrick, saying, give Ukraine exactly what they're asking for. Genocide is happening right before our eyes. Never again must mean never again. Actions, not words. And then he goes on to say, it doesn't get any more, quote, provocative and escalatory than this, Mr. President. Enough with the economic half measures and military appeasement. That's just some of the responses there when it comes to members of Congress. You can add yours to the mix as well. For the next half hour, if you wish, 202-748-8000 for the Eastern and Central time zones. For the Mountain and Pacific time zones, 202-748-8001. And you can text us at 202-748-8003. One of the people tracking what's going on when it comes to atrocities are concerned, one of the groups
That's really interesting. I wonder if they're going to keep this forever or not. They kind of changed the Republican-Democrat independent lines.
Is a group known as Human Rights Watch, saying that this is USA Today reporting that the atrocities allegedly committed by Russian forces in Ukraine have not only been witnessed by reporters, but also documented by that non-governmental organization. HRW said interviews with victims, witnesses, and residents of Ukrainian territories occupied by Russian yielded amounts of several war crimes, including executions, rapes, and other forms of violence against civilians. Goes on to quote him as quote one of the representatives saying, the cases we documented amount to the unspeakable deliberate cruelty and violence against Ukrainian civilians. That's Hugh Williamson. He's the Europe and Central Asia director at Human Rights Watch. Rape, murder, and other violent acts against people in the Russian forces' custody should be investigated as war crimes. Again, that's just one of the groups that are helping in looking and investigating this process. In Ohio, we'll hear from Don. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, what happens over there is terrible. We should just go ahead. If we give them tanks, just give them the MeGs and let them get it over with. But my second comment is, we don't have to hear this every day, the tragedy that happens in another country, and they do nothing about the border, and they don't show us the border every day, and the 100,000 people that got killed by the drugs.
Well,
why do
going
we
back to your first point, as far as the MiGs are
Dude,
concerned, why do you think that's the solution?
Yeah, get it over with so many people don't have to die.
And do you think that will resolve the issue without causing escalation?
Yes, I do. I think we're fearing Putin too much. We need to get rid of Biden if he can't do it.
Okay, that's a caller from Ohio. We'll hear next from Cheryl.
Man, I feel like Putin's just like, give me a reason. Come on, America, just give me a reason. Like they want.
I want to begin.
They want to throw down.
For weeding out these wacko callers of yours. I think, which is a sad state of affairs in our country. I think we need to give Ukraine everything that they need. They should have, and NATO needs to step it up. We know what's coming ahead. Once Mariupol, the videos coming out from there. So, thank you for taking my call.
Well, Cheryl, before you leave, when you say give them let's start with that. Give them everything they need. What do you mean by that specifically?
Yeah, whatever they need specifically. If they need planes, give them the planes. They need more ammunition, give them more ammunition. What we cannot let this continue to happen when we see what came out over the weekend in Bucha. We already know several other areas are a lot worse.
When it comes to the planes, I'll ask you what I asked the last caller as far as concerns of our escalation, especially from Vladimir Putin and Russia. Are you concerned about that if planes are put into the mix?
I'm more concerned about seeing dead babies on the side of the road. I'm more worried about seeing mass graves.
Okay, we'll go to.
I'm not a military person, so again, whatever they need. Should be no questioning about it at this point. Thank you for taking my call.
Okay, let's hear from Richard in New York. Go ahead.
Yes, good morning. Thank you for taking my call. I've been thinking about this for a while since the invasion began, and I really think that NATO should declare Ukraine a temporary member of NATO and invoke Article 5 and send a couple 100,000 troops into Ukraine to back up the Ukrainians.
But then
bluff.
What do you think?
It's not a bluff. They're literally going to war with Ukraine. The only reason they're not second we get troops down there, they're not going to war with Ukraine anymore. They're going to war with America and Ukraine.
What do you think are the consequences of calling the bluff if that route were taken?
Well, like I said, I think it's a bluff. So I don't believe.
But what if it's not?
We will use nuclear weapons.
Why not?
That's not the bluff, though. There's so many more things that Putin can do other than use nuclear weapons. He has a whole arsenal of stuff that he's ready to just start using. I mean, I don't know if he's ready to fight America about it, but
because he doesn't want to die.
Okay.
He and his buddies don't want to die. I mean,
See, all right. Everyone's kind of been pointing out Putin's age, and that's a fair point, but I don't think they get the right reasons. People say, oh, he's 70, he's insane. I don't think that's it, I think now, if age is a thing that he thinks about, if age is something he's considering in a way that most leaders, most despots kind of do. And that's, if I'm going to leave my country a little better than I left it. He's trying to create a stronger Russia so that when he leaves, whoever takes his place, whoever he decides to take his place, will have a foothold that they can use to amplify Russia to the next generation. not for its people, but for its government, for the people who are on top. That's really fucking scary, because that's a person who's ready to take risks. Like, if he wants an Iron Curtain by the time he's 80, he's gonna get one, or he's at least gonna try, you know?
Because that's what will happen, yeah? This mutually assured destruction thing and all.
Okay. Timothy is next. He's in Vermont.
Yes. Good morning, Pedro. Regarding the NATO response, there's a constant iteration of giving Ukraine MiG-29s, and I'm just afraid that Russia can take those 29s out like nobody's business. Regarding aircraft specifically, I think an appropriate plane would have to be the A-10 Warthog, which has a
I need like a teacup. I keep spilling my tea.
Minigun on it, which is capable of shooting about 6,000 rounds a minute. And I've seen a test firing in Jericho, Vermont, because of General Electric and now Martin Marietta. And I happened to be working on the base one day, and they did a test firing for us. And I can tell you they shot 100 rounds, and it took 1 second. The thing about those guys is they're low and slow, and they can go underneath the radar, arguably.
Right. The United States and other countries have downplayed the use of military jets. So aside from that, what do you think is a response that the U.S. and NATO could do when it comes to atrocities that we've seen over the last few days?
Well, okay, regarding the atrocities, because Ukraine is not a NATO country, and our reticence to get involved, I think arguably that the best scenario that Putin would like to see is for NATO and the United States to get involved into it. Therefore, he can use it as a propaganda angle, and then he can escalate himself exponentially.
Okay, that's Timothy there in Vermont. Again, for our first guest joining us in about 15 minutes, if you want to comment on these atrocities that you've seen reported over the last couple of days, and then get you to respond as far as how the U.S. and NATO should react to that. Again, 202-748-8000 for the Eastern and Central time zones, and 202-748-8001 for the Mountain and Pacific time zones. An uptick in sanctions, the topic of a story in the Wall Street Journal this morning, particularly when it comes from the EU, saying European diplomats said there's a range of options being discussed. One is to present a separate package that could include oil and coal sanctions, which could be phased in. A second possibility is that European leaders could be called to discuss energy sanctions. Among the ideas under consideration is the possibility of placing a significant tariff on Russian oil and coal imports in a bid to encourage member states to rapidly reduce their use. Germany, Austria, and Hungary's newly re-elected government have led the opposition to energy import bans, although German officials have signaled wiggle room on oil and coal import bans. Berlin has presented a plan to phase out the use of Russian coal by the summer and Russian oil by the end of the year.
Wow.
We'll hear next from Willie. Willie in North Carolina. Hello.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm well, thanks. Go ahead.
My position is that, first and foremost, the entire situation is ugly, and the situation that we just saw in Bucha is extremely ugly if all the details, if all the facts that we're getting can be 100% believed. War is ugly, and sometimes you have both sides that have their own aims. I sincerely believe just about everything I've seen. At the same time, I think that the U.S. and NATO should take a look at how we got to this point. We get here by a man feeling cornered. I don't think by further cornering him, by doing what we're doing alone, I don't think that that's the answer. I think that you have to have really
Putin was cornered.
important and intelligent leadership not only from NATO but from the U.S.
You know, you might feel cornered. Our maps, you know, when we draw the map, it's pretty flat. World's round, though. Either way, he's got a pretty big corner. I don't think he's feeling very pressured right now.
From Biden in particular, he has to look at the situation realistically, not politically, not these.
There's currently a church in Ukraine, in the Bucha area, that people are suspecting is like a mass grave site right now. They're investigating that.
Ideal, not idealistically. Everybody don't agree with us. The man feels cornered. He's warned NATO, and I say warned, but I mean, and I don't mean threatened, but he's told NATO years and years ago, look, you guys are just steadily encroaching. You're steadily encroaching. You're steadily encroaching. You're steadily inviting everybody around me. I don't see you as a friend. I see you as my enemy. In the same way that now NATO, we see him as the enemy. So this is real. These are real geopolitical things that we have to live with not only in this decade, but for decades to come. And we have to make smart decisions right through here.
So what's the smartest decision that can be made at this point then?
In my mind, Zelensky and Putin, not Biden, not the EU, Zelensky and Putin need to sit.
Oh no.
This is my country. Watch my language. This is my country. This is your country.
Okay, that's Willie. And Willie, well, thank you for clarifying that. Watch your language as far as when you make comments here. But again, that's just some of the sampling of people that you've heard over the last 20 minutes or so when it comes to the U.S. and NATO response. You can add yours to the mix for the next 10 minutes. If you want to give us a call before our first guest this morning, 202-748-8000 for the Eastern and Central time zones, 202-748-8001 for the Mountain and Pacific time zones. It was the Ukrainian President Zelensky making remarks over to the media when it comes to what's being reported out of Bucha. It's translated, but here's some of those remarks from Monday.
That is real genocide. What you have seen here today, what you can see, what happened. We know thousands of people that were tortured and killed with cut off hands and legs, extremities, and what they did to the women. Our delegation was at a meeting in Turkey. There was the negotiating group with the Minister of Foreign Affairs. Something didn't quite work out there. Well, that was clear why. And I would say that the longer the Russian Federation will drag out the meeting process, the worse will be for them and, in principle, for this situation, for this war. Because with every day when our army are moving into the previously occupied territory, you can see what's happening. It's very difficult to talk when you see what they have done here. And day by day, they find bodies in cellars, people tortured, people killed. So if they have something to think with, they have to think quick.
Here is Diane from Ann Arbor, Michigan. Hello.
Yes, hello. Thank you. When I see President Biden, world leaders in NATO, they had better gather courage. When I see them, I'm sorry, I see cowards. They make excuses so they don't have to act. NATO treated Ukraine like some elite social club, and Ukraine did everything they could to show their sincerity. They got rid of their nukes, which probably was a mistake. Putin might be a little more afraid of them if they still had them. And what does NATO do? Just leave them out to dry.
They're not part of NATO yet, though.
So what's the appropriate action at this point?
Let's say again?
What's the appropriate action at this point, then?
Up until, fairly recently, I'm pretty sure Ukraine had an agreement with Russia to stay neutral and to never join NATO ever. And, then things started kicking up a little bit, and then the talks started happening again. And now they're trying to join NATO, and now NATO's refusing because they're like, well, you're in the middle of a war, and we don't really want to go to war with Russia.
I think they should gather.
Because war between Russia and NATO would mean absolute cutoff from Russian gas line imports, and that would shut down so many countries in Europe. It would be really bad.
Trained international group of peacekeepers to go into Ukraine and show Putin we're not going to take this. We're afraid of his nukes. He's always going to have nukes. So that's his ticket to go around and pummel any country he feels like. And then we watch as our country reports all the atrocities and say, oh, how terrible, and not do anything about it. Putin's not going to stop. Putin hasn't felt the pain of this. He still has his plushy apartment in the Kremlin. He still has his castle. He still has his yachts. He still has his bank accounts hidden away, no doubt, in American dollars. I mean, he's no fool.
Okay.
And everyone's afraid of him.
Okay. Let's hear from Gary, Corpus Christi, Texas. You're next.
Yeah, good morning.
You're on, sir. Go ahead.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
You're on. Yes, go ahead.
Okay, well, the thing I don't understand is I'm going on 80 years old. I understand what the Holocaust was. I don't understand why other people can't relate the Holocaust to this genocide that's going on in Ukraine. Why doesn't the whole world just condemn this Russian thing and tell him, Putin, you either stop this stuff or we're coming in whether you like it or not, and that's it.
What do you mean by that? As far as that last part, what do you mean as far as we're coming in like it or not? What exactly do you mean by that?
We're going to come into Ukraine. You can either stay there, get yourself killed, or you can back off and get back in your own country. But enough of this is enough.
Paul is next. Paul is in Illinois.
I'm in favor of putting in a no-fly zone, and then the NATO nations moving troops into Ukraine. I don't know what else we could do. The atrocities is something we cannot stand by and watch.
What do you think the no-fly zone and those troops will do?
Well, I would hope they would stall some of the aggression that is going on, and if need be, help defend the Ukrainian and the rest of the free world.
That's Paul there in Illinois. We're going to take your calls for just a few more minutes before our first guest joining us this morning. But in other news, aside from what's going on in Russia and Ukraine, when it comes to matters of the Supreme Court, the Associated Press reporting that Republican Senators Lisa Murkowski and Mitt Romney say they're going to vote to confirm Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson's historic elevation to the Supreme Court, giving President Biden's nominee a burst of bipartisan support, and all but assuring she'll become the first black female justice. The senators from Alaska and Utah announced their decisions Monday night ahead of a procedural vote to advance the nomination. And as Democrats press to confirm Judge Jackson by the end of the week, Republican Senator Susan Collins of Maine announced last week she would back Jackson, noting, quote, her stellar qualifications as a federal judge, public defender, and member of the U.S. Sentencing Commission. David is next. David in Youngstown, Ohio. Hello.
Hello.
You're on. Go ahead.
I'm wondering why it is that we can take out Bin Laden, we can take out Saddam Hussein with these drones and all this stuff, but this corrupt man that is doing all this shit to these people, babies, women, people that don't even have nothing to do with war, are getting killed.
Paula in Maryland. Good morning. You're next.
Good morning.
You're on. Hi.
Hi. I don't think it's just the U.S. The UN has to act as well as NATO. They don't. They need to act and not allow Russia just to vote in the UN and then they don't take action. But they do need to send troops in and help them out. I don't know if air is the option because that could cause Putin to do other things, but they do need to act, and they need to do more than they're doing now, not just the U.S., but the whole world.
When you say troops, do you mean NATO troops specifically? Do you mean U.S. troops? What do you mean by that?
I mean NATO, UN. The UN needs to go in like they did in Korea and do an action also. It's not just a matter of the U.S. The U.S. is not they need to do a police action and go in and help the Ukrainians.
Again, the UN Security Council meeting today to talk about these recent events. Amongst them, they'll hear from Ukraine's president as well. You can see that at cspan.org and our app C-SPAN Now. One of the people also commenting yesterday was the Defense Department Secretary Lloyd Austin through the Pentagon Press Secretary John Kirby yesterday, relaying what General Austin said and next steps for the Defense Department.
He, of course, also expressed outrage at the apparent atrocities that were committed by Russian forces in Bucha and across Ukraine, and reiterated the U.S. commitment to using every tool available to help document and share information in an effort to hold accountable those responsible.
Bucha.
And of course, they have stayed in close contact and will continue to stay in close contact. On the document and evidence front, I want to stress that this is an administration effort, not DOD specifically, that we, in concert with so many other nations around the world, will do what we can to make sure that that clear evidence of these war crimes are documented and preserved for investigators to look at. I don't have anything specific to speak to in terms of DOD capabilities with respect to that collection, but it's part of an interagency effort to make sure that that the war crimes are properly documented.
Secretary Austin and Joint Chiefs Chairman Mark Milley appearing before the hearing today to talk about the 2023 defense budget request. You can see that on C-SPAN 3, cspan.org, and our C-SPAN Now app. This is Cal in Washington State. Hello.
Good morning. This is a little bit more from a humanitarian perspective. I would like to see all the allied nations undergo an airlift using like C-130s for humanitarian aid. And I would tell Putin this is brought on by the evidence of what we've seen after you've left some of these areas. And if you attack or in any way hinder this airlift, the world will have to take it on and finish the job for you. My friend is was a loadmaster in the Vietnam era for a C-130s, and he was describing the amount of capacity that those planes have to drop strictly humanitarian aid, clothing, pharmaceuticals, food, in different areas of the country. And if it was a worldwide effort, any countries that have this capability would participate. It's just atrocious what's happened to these people. And for a while, Putin got away with taking out his war against the civilian population, but they brought it to a head themselves, and it's over now.
One more call. This will be from Mart in Colorado.
Good morning, sir. I'd just like to say I served in Iraq in 2003 and 2005. We have to fight. You have to stand up to people like this in the world. You have to. The reason this is going on is because we're just hoping that it's not going to happen again. And we have to stand up and be firm with these kind of people in these countries so this stuff doesn't happen. A life is a life. It doesn't matter if it's American blood or Ukrainian blood. A life is a life. We have to do what we have to do to save lives.
That's Mart in Colorado, finishing off this half hour of calls. Thanks to all of you who participated. Two guests joining us among three in the course of the morning, but two coming up in a little bit. Representative Glenn Grothman, Republican of Wisconsin. He's the ranking Republican on the House Oversight and Reform Subcommittee, talking about national security issues, including Title 42 and immigration policy. Later on in the program, we'll learn more about Title 42 from Muzaffar Chishti of the Migration Policy Institute. And also, he'll talk about the Biden administration's decision to end pandemic border rules. Those conversations coming up on Washington Journal.
Thomas story.
Is watching on C-SPAN, powered by cable.
Washington Journal continues.
You can text us thoughts too at 202-748-8003. The Hill reporting this morning in a recent story that the Pentagon will send a second batch of arms to Ukraine as the country enters its second month under Russian invasion. The U.S. will send a variety of equipment to aid in defense, including 10 of the Switchblade drones, which are armed with tank-busting warheads, according to multiple reports. Quote, "We are going to support Ukraine's ability to defend itself. We're going to do as much as we can and as fast as we can." That was John Kirby talking about that decision at the Pentagon press briefing on Monday. You can find more of that Pentagon press briefing, by the way, online. If you want to go to our website at cspan.org and also at our C-SPAN Now app, you can find it there. Also, when it comes to the case of war crimes, a piece by Axios about the possibility of Vladimir Putin being convicted on war crimes, saying it could be a difficult task. It quotes Alex Whiting of Harvard Law School, saying that one of the main challenges is determining who's responsible and what evidence exists that can establish culpability. According to him, he's a visiting professor there. He's a deputy specialist prosecutor in the Kosovo Specialist Prosecutor's Office in The Hague, adding that high-profile leaders often aren't at the scene of alleged war crimes, making them harder to prosecute. In Bushehr, for example, where reports have emerged of mass grave and bodies of civilians there, the main challenge for investigators is determining who's responsible and how high up the chain of command the responsibility goes, explains Whiting, who previously served as a prosecutor on the International Criminal Court. And for its part, the Kremlin has rejected reports of atrocities in Bushehr, saying that, and previously called Biden's war criminal remarks unacceptable. Again, that's just issues when it comes to Ukraine. Other things happening as well. You can comment on that during open forum as well. If you wish up till 8:30, let's start with Bob in Falls Creek, Pennsylvania. Democrats line, go ahead.
I was just wanting to comment on the congressman that was just on there. How much time they spent talking about Hunter Biden, but when specifically asked about the money that the Trump's kids made, he never touched that question at all. It's just a comment I'd like to make. Thank you.
On our Republican line, we'll hear from James. James in South Carolina. Go ahead, you're next.
Hello, yes. Well, I'd just like to say that, I guess that Hunter Biden story came out to be true after all, though it's tried to be debunked for months and months and months and months and months throughout the campaign and all. Now we know that most everything on that laptop is accurate. And, of course, as far as all the rest of that goes, you can see what's happened to the country since we have what we have in there for President Reject. Also, to become and remain a NATO nation, you have to have secure borders, which we don't. So what does that tell you about what's going on?
Okay, that's James in South Carolina. When it comes to supplemental funding and COVID response, the White House making a request for more money. Lindsay McPherson from Roll Call reporting that on Monday, it was Senate negotiators releasing text to provide $10 billion in that supplemental funding to the Department of Health and Human Services. The package, which is unlike an earlier agreement, does not include any international aid, is fully offset by repurposing $10 billion in unspent funds from prior pandemic relief laws, and it crystallizes an informal, quote, agreement in principle that the parties reached to last week on $10 billion in overall spending and offsets. You can see more of that in Roll Call this morning. On this open forum, we'll hear from Karen in Connecticut, Independent Line.
Hi. I really love that the independent woman had mentioned that, they have to put down the other, the Democrats in some way, every time to, why can't they go on their own, policies? Because they lack policies for people. That's why. They're not for helping us. I mean, how many Americans
that makes
would
no
like
sense.
to do away with our socialist workman's comp or when you get your benefits when you're laid off, do you really want that, where we don't get them? When you're putting control into corporate. It's ridiculous. And just our healthcare system. It's devastated my family. the cost of everything. We worked hard all our lives to risk losing the house all the time. It's crazy. If we had health care for all, we could choose our doctor again. We used to be able to do that. It just upsets me that we're going so towards
Big Bird stole your wings, bro. No.
Republicans have so much power. They have 20.
We gotta find them. You gotta learn how to fly.
3 trifectas. And why don't people just...
How you doing, Drip Guy? Welcome to the stream. I'm just hanging out. This is what I do before school. I got class at 8:30 a.m. Mountain Time. Right now it's 7 o'clock Mountain Time. I just do a little bit of C-SPAN calls. This is the voice of the people. Yeah, we just hang out.
How they're going to do things to help us
That's Karen there in Connecticut. When it comes to matters of health care, former President Obama expected to visit the White House today with current President Biden to sign legislation to fix portions of the Affordable Care Act. Annie Lesky writing that the immediate reason...
Man, Big Bird's fucking up your wings, too. You don't even fly with them.
Witness President Biden signing that executive order that would strengthen the Affordable Care Act, Obama's landmark domestic achievement. But it also adds that President Obama's appearance will also take place against a backdrop of low poll numbers for President Biden, dim electoral prospects for Democrats, and an urgent search for a spark by party leaders. The public reintroduction of the party's popular former leader may not be a coincidence, and it could signal a higher profile for former President Obama in coming months as President Biden and the Democrats seek to focus attention on their efforts to help ordinary Americans. Look out for that today. And stay close to our website and C-SPAN Now for that visit by former President Obama. Charles, let's hear from, I think we took Charles from West Virginia. Let's go to Roderick in Florida, Democrats line. Hi.
Hi, my name is Roderick Robinson. I'm a prisoners' rights activist exposing the de facto murders and mayhem of American inmates. America is a racist country. All you have to do is Google my name, Google interview with Roderick P. Robinson, ex-con turned prisoners' rights activist, and there you'll see a handwritten note from an FBI agent, Ed Satterfield, from Cleveland, Ohio FBI office, alleging that I was
out to the plug.
And send it down to the Cincinnati FBI.
The shameless
self-plug. That was around 2004. They have never done anything about the murders and mayhem of American inmates. The Kool-Aid and tea that they serve in the jails and prisons has carcinogens in it, cancer-causing agents. They're engendering cancer into them. They're robbing them of their cognizance. When they get out, they have to get...
Okay, that's Roderick in Florida. By the way, that visit by former President Obama slated about 1:30 this afternoon. Again, stay close to the website.
There's carcinogens in the Kool-Aid, bro.
See more of that.
Don't drink it,
George
bro.
in Trenton, Michigan, Democrats line. Hi.
Hi, how you doing? Just had a comment about the Ukraine thing. It's hilarious that how when President Trump was in office, they gave, he did not come down hard on Russia at all, and now look what Russia is doing, committing atrocities. No Republicans are mentioning that today. And what really option do we have? Because Russia has nuclear capabilities, so what can we really do to curb the violence in Ukraine? It's a sad day for the entire world. Thank you.
That's George there in Trenton, Michigan. This is from a viewer in Missouri, in Arnold, Missouri.
George spitting facts.
Democrats line.
Yeah. Yes. Good morning. I'd like to ask about Josh Hawley. Does he need a vote this coming election? And Joe Mancini. I would like to be able to vote for that guy. Because I don't think he would get my vote, just like the lady said before. The Republican Party in the United States is a sham. They are acting like a gang. The Cribs are the Bloods, and they just do anything they want to, and then they complain. Thank you, sir.
That's RG in Missouri. Again, we've got open forum for about 15 more minutes. 202-748-8001 for Republicans, 202-748-8000 for Democrats and Independents, 202-748-8002. You can text us as you wish at 202-748-8003. Look for a vote later on this week to confirm President Biden's nominee to the Supreme Court. One of the people commenting on that process was Senator Lindsey Graham Republican of South Carolina.
Now, about her being the first African-American nominee before this committee of the Supreme Court. That's true. And the reason that's true is because of what y'all did to Janice Rogers Brown. The only reason that's true is because my Democratic colleagues back in 2005 filibustered for 2 years, 2003 to 5, Janice Rogers Brown, a Supreme Court justice from the state of California that was picked by President Bush to be on the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeal, the same court that I voted for Judge Jackson. It's kind of a one level below the Supreme Court. And for 2 years, there was a wholesale filibuster of her. And when it got to be possible for her to be on the Supreme Court as a possibility, then Senator Biden said she would be filibustered. Senator Durbin, Senator Schumer all filibustered her and told this body that if you pick her, she's likely to be filibustered. That's why Judge Jackson is the first African-American nominee to come before this body to be on the Supreme Court, because you made it that way. Because when you had a chance to support an African-American conservative, you used her ideology against her. You blocked her from being considered by this committee, and we're supposed to be like trained seals over here clapping when you appoint a liberal. That's not going to work. We live in America today where your ideology is held against you if you're a conservative, and when you're a liberal, we're supposed to embrace.
So goddamn annoying. Like this during this committee hearing for Ketanji Brown Jackson, the entire time, or like basically like there would be like offhand comments or something between the Republicans of, oh, we should just block everything until Republicans can stack the courts again, like as a joke. But it's not a joke. Like that's literally what they want to do all the time, and like. It doesn't, it's like, I can't really feel bad about what Lindsey Graham's saying when there's like more conservatives on the Supreme Court. This is probably the most conservative Supreme Court we've had in history.
About you and not ask hard questions. That's not the world we're going to live in.
Most partisan for sure.
If we get back the Senate and we're in charge of this body, and there's judicial openings, we will talk to our colleagues on the other side. But if we're in charge,
always what they
she would
say.
not have been before this committee. You would have had somebody more moderate than this.
Again, see that on our website at cspan.org or also at our app at CSPAN Now. This is Joe in New Jersey, Republican line. Hi.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm fine, thank you.
I'm just, wanted to call in and say that, they have all these illegals coming over the border, and they're not required to get a vaccine, but they want to continue this attack on Americans and have them continue to wear masks for their children in hospitals or when you go to a doctor's appointment. I just think that, there's the rules for thee and not for me, and I think it's on over everything that is involved in politics. They're just treating Republicans and independents differently than Democrats. And we see that every day when we see Joe out there with no mask on, and when we see Kamala out there with no mask on.
We lifted we lifted the mask mandate. We did. We federally lifted the mask mandate. We've actually lifted a lot of COVID restrictions in the past month. Like, there's no rules for thee and not for me. If you are living in a place where you still need to wear a mask, that's because of your local government, all right? You need to talk to your local government about that.
It's all a big game, and, it's just we're just the puppets.
I live in Fort Collins, Colorado. I haven't worn a mask for a month.
In this big game.
Okay, and we'll go to Jose in Tulsa, Oklahoma, Democrats line.
Yes, good morning to you.
Morning.
I just wanted to call and let people...
Gone.
Let's go to Paula. Paula in Largo, Florida, Republican line. Hi.
Hi, I just wanted to call and wonder why we have 6,000 people wanting to drill, and they can't because they haven't signed the order to let them drill. And we have people in...
people always want to drill.
We also have ways that we used to have pipelines and stuff, so we could get the oil to the factories and to the where they make the oil, where they clear the oil. Why are we tying this all up? Why aren't we helping them do it? Why aren't we shipping the money to them instead of to a foreign country or places where they don't like us at all?
Okay, that's Paula in Florida. The United Nations people involved in looking at issues of climate change putting out a new report as far as where the world is in reaching certain goals. ABC reporting that countries are not on track to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. That's the conservative figure based on the Paris Agreement, and that's according to the latest report by the UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change released yesterday. Global emissions will need to peak by 2025 at the latest and then steeply reduce thereafter to prevent worsening impacts, according to the report. And the report also warns that, quote, considerable fossil fuel infrastructure will need to be abandoned to sufficiently reduce emissions, including coal assets by 2030 and oil and gas about 2050. Countries with plans to invest in new fossil fuel infrastructure are engaging in, quote, moral and economic madness. That's the assessment from the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. There's more there at the ABC report, but if you want to read the new findings from the United Nations when it takes a look at issues of climate change. This is from Cindy, Independent Line in New Mexico. Good morning.
Good morning. I was calling because I have had trouble identifying a way to get assistance, and maybe you can help enlighten me as far as the powers that be and what the limitations are as far as what people who are working with the government have. What happened to me, I'm a school professional, and I was pulled into a meeting. There was political motivations to bring up my child sexual abuse in a very public way. And it was public for me because it was in front of a group of my peers at school. Allegedly, the FBI was on the phone. Allegedly, Donald Trump was on the phone. And they said there were pictures of me with Epstein, and they brought up child sexual abuse.
Okay.
I've been a school.
Okay, let's go to Patricia in Chicago, Illinois, Democrats line. Go ahead.
Hello, is this for Patricia from Chicago?
You're on. Go ahead.
Yes, I'm thinking that for some time now that our fiscal policy needs to be reconstructed or rethought. We have like 23 million gamblers. Okay, I know gambling is frowned upon, but we have 23 million gamblers that lose like $55,000, I believe, a year. And that equals like $1.3 trillion. So if we change or reconstruct our fiscal policy to include proceeds and establish a gambling, USA gambling establishment per se, proceeds, just the factor of proceeds can bring money back into our nation so our debt wouldn't be so high and we'd be able to manage our national deficit and so forth. So I would like for that to be taken into consideration, that we reconstruct our fiscal policy, not to just include spending and revenue. It should also include proceeds.
So you're are you saying like setting up federal establishments specifically for gambling?
Yes, and the proceeds, not just revenue. We need direct proceeds to close this deficit and debt we're in. We're in the trillions. Gambling establishments, proceeds are in the trillions. So that only makes common sense to me if we want to get out of debt sooner.
Do you like to gamble yourself, if I may ask?
My father was a gambler, and I'm a certified teacher here in Chicago. Mm-hmm. But I do use my leisure time to gamble. It was a pastime of my father's, and I enjoy it too. And when I look at debt.org, if you want a frame of reference, if you want to cite this, there are 23 million people. That's about 10% of our whole nation that love to gamble. And, it does a lot for people, and it does a lot for the gambling establishments. So if we were to make a profit off of gambling, then we would close our national debt, and the deficit would be easier to manage.
Did you float this idea with any of your legislators?
What an interesting thing to think about.
Power there in the Chicago area?
That'd be so weird.
No, I'm not that politically inclined, but
It's like, I don't know, the government's fucking you over, and then at the same time they're offering a gambling service for you to win. It's like they're creating their own lottery system almost.
When I read that nationaldebt.org posting, or I considered it, you know, but it's just this nation, it just won't change enough to suit the needs of the public.
Gotcha. That's Patricia in Chicago, Illinois. This is Gene in Park Ridge, Illinois, Republican line. Hello.
Yes, sir. Good morning. 2 quick points. I hope that the members of the United Nations and the Human Rights Council will kick Russia off and send them packing. Number 2, what many don't know, that there are American human remains from wartime still within Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia, North Korea, that still need to be tended to. God bless our troops, and let's stay safe.
At the UN Security Council meeting at 10 o'clock this morning, a variety of speakers included reportedly the Ukrainian president to speak on issues of the last few days occurring in Ukraine. Look for that at cspan.org, also C-SPAN Now, our app. About 5 more minutes left in this open forum. Beverly, Cleveland, Ohio, Democrats line. Hi.
Hi. Good morning, Pedro. This is Beverly Ellington. Hello?
You're on. Go ahead.
Okay. I would like to talk about the country and whole. You know, everybody say, you know, we're a racist country, and we should, start, being together and stuff like that. But I just feel and stuff like that. They don't. The Congress, all the people, get out and vote, for, different parties and stuff like that. But they don't never keep their promises, and what they supposed to do. And a lot is going on in this world and stuff, and all across America. But I think that they should keep their promises in what they're going to do. And I don't think a lot of people are going to get out and vote in the next election because they didn't keep their promises. That's all I have to say.
Beverly and Cleveland. Do you plan to vote in the next election, Beverly?
Yes, I do.
The midterms, if it impacts you, yeah. So.
Yeah, it impacts me. Yeah, so I intend to vote, but a lot of young people and my family and friends, they don't want to vote because all the promises that they promised, they're not keeping. So I'm hoping I can persuade them to go back to the polls and vote because we got to vote. That's all I have to say. And nice talking to you, Pedro.
Beverly in Ohio, a line for Democrats. One of the people speaking about the president's nominee for the Supreme Court at that Senate Judiciary Committee, which moved the vote out of the committee and towards the final process of getting a vote to her to the Supreme Court. That was Senator Cory Booker, Democrat of New Jersey. Here's his remarks before the committee.
How could they create these caricatures? How could they create these exaggerations? How could they disrespect a person like her who's done everything right in her life and in her journey? How? How qualified do you have to be, double Harvard? How qualified do you have to be clerking at all levels of the federal judiciary? How qualified do you have to be 3 times confirmed by the Senate in a bipartisan manner? And so, Senate, I have to say, today is the birthday of a great poet named Maya Angelou. And so I'm just going to end with those words. Why does this poem strike a chord with so many Americans? Because they feel it to their bones. And so this is in honor of Maya Angelou and the next Supreme Court Justice of the United States of America. Happy birthday, Maya, Dr. Angelou. You may try to write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me down in the very dirt, but still, like dust, I rise. Rise, Sister Jackson. Rise, Judge Jackson. All the way to the highest court in the land. And when we have that final vote, I will rejoice. Ancestors will rejoice. And we will say, Lord, this is a day that you have made. Thank you.
Philip is in Big Sandy, Tennessee, independent line.
Hey,
amen for what I just heard on TV.
Yeah.
My problem is, why
Sorry.
is the January 6th committee dragging their feet on throwing Trump's ass in jail? He's shown 100 million people how stupid he is, how he abused the Constitution of the United States, and then he gets on TV and tells Putin he's a genius. Now, I'm not knocking C-SPAN, but, we have this other network owned by the Murdochs that they do the same thing that Trump does.
Okay, that's Philip in Big Sandy, Texas. You may want to see a story that was posted on Politico on the April 4th, taking a look at the question that the caller poses, just to read you a bit of it, saying, should the January 6th committee ask the Justice Department to pursue a criminal case against Donald Trump? It's a question with political heft, but no practical effect. And some panel members of the January 6th committee are increasingly skeptical. After all, as multiple lawmakers on the Select Committee noted in recent interviews, the Justice Department is aware of the volume of evidence pointing to violations of the law by Mr. Trump. The evidence got underscored emphatically last week when a federal judge ruled that the former president more likely than not committed felonies to try to overturn the 2020 election. And the Select Committee could send a criminal referral to the Attorney General outlining its recommendations, lawmakers note, but it would have no substantial value. There's more to that. It was posted yesterday at Politico if you want to read that for yourself. Let's hear from Pat in Baltimore, Maryland, Republican line.
Hello.
You're on. Go ahead.
Okay. My comment is for the Democrats, the Republicans, the Independents, and the news media. Please just tell the truth.
Okay, that's the last call for this open forum. Thanks to all of you who participated. Two guests joining us for the remainder of the show. We're going to learn more about Title 42, which we took up with the last guest, but a guest from the Migration Policy Institute joining us next, Muzaffar Tishti. We'll talk about Title 42
we're gonna watch
the
that.
administration's decision to end it when it comes to pandemic border rules. Later on, we're focusing on the push to establish a Supreme Court Code of Ethics in wake of the Clarence Thomas and Ginny Thomas story. That discussion with Fix the Court Executive Director Gabe Roth. Those coming up on Washington Journal.
Okay, I need to do a little bit of some morning chores real fast. It won't take incredibly long, but we'll get the other thing going.
Washington Journal continues.
Our first guest of the morning is Representative Glenn Grothman. He's a Republican of Wisconsin, a member of the Oversight and Reform Subcommittee. In fact, he's the ranking member of the Subcommittee on National Security, also a member of the Budget Committee. Representative Grothman, thanks for joining us.
Glad to be on the show as always. A lot going on in Washington today.
One of those things going on as of recent days was the president's decision on May 23rd to end Title 42. To offer our viewers an explanation, can you briefly explain what it is and what do you think about the decision by the Biden administration?
Horrible idea. President Trump began Title 42 to keep people out of this country out of fear because of the COVID epidemic. But obviously it kept down the number of people coming in the country. Now, most months we're around 70 to 90,000, maybe over 100,000 people coming. If we repealed Title 42, which means more families and a lot more single people coming, that number could shoot up from 80,000 to 500,000. And that's the administration's own number. I don't know what our country is going to do if we begin to get as many as 500,000 people coming here every month.
When it comes to the decision then by the administration, one of the things they looked at was the dropping of cases in the United States. Do you think that will change things, or is at least that's justifiable when it comes to the decision to drop Title 42 overall?
No. The number of people with COVID goes up and down. We still have more people dying of COVID today than we did, say, last June or July. So, no. In all sorts of other areas, they don't feel this COVID thing is over. And it may not be over. No, that's not a good excuse. Not to mention, what are we going to do with all these people who are not appropriately vetting? 500,000 people a month?
One of the responses coming out of the Department of Homeland Security came from Alejandro Mayorkas himself, saying that once the 42 order wasn't in place, he said DHS will process individuals encountered at pursuant to Title VIII proceedings, and said that the department was capable of doing that. What do you think about that response?
I don't know if they're capable of doing that or not. I mean, obviously, you're having a huge increase in the number of people coming here. I don't know how you begin to process that. We already have a problem right now in that people are coming off the border, Border Patrol coming off the border to process the people coming in here. And by the way, over the weekend, we got another horrible number that I wasn't even aware of till this morning. Traditionally, over the last year, in general, we say in addition to the people being processed, about 30,000 people sneak in, what they call gotaways. The Border Patrol is now double that, and they estimate that in March, instead of 30,000, we have about 60,000 gotaways coming in the country, which is, I think, is what happens when you don't have enough people guarding the border.
The minority leader yesterday, Kevin McCarthy, said he's planning another trip down to the border to take a look at these issues. Are you going to be part of that trip, or Republicans that you know of will be part of that trip?
Well, I'll be down there next week. I don't know if Kevin's going to be on the same trip as me, but I do intend to be down there next week looking at the situation again. We'll be looking at the California part of the border as well as the Yuma, Arizona area.
And when you go down there, what exactly are you looking for, and who do you talk to learn more about these things?
We talk to Border Patrol, like always. You can't talk to the people at the top to find out what's going on. You got to talk to the people who do the work. So I always try to get the Border Patrol up to the side a little and find out what's really going on.
Our guest is with us until 8 o'clock. If you want to ask him questions about this new decision by the Biden administration when it comes to Title 42 or other topics, 202-748-8001 for Republicans, 202-748-8000 for Democrats, Independents, 202-748-8002. You can text us at 202-748-8003. Representative Grothman, you've probably heard that 3 states are suing the Biden administration over this decision. That was one of the topics that came up at the White House press briefing. I want to play a little bit of what Jen Psaki had to say in response to that and then get your response to it.
One question on Title 42. Some Republican attorneys general are suing the administration over the plan to lift it. What is the administration's response? And is the administration concerned that this would end up blocking the push to lift the order?
Well, on the lawsuit itself, I'd of course refer you to the Department of Justice. They would be overseeing any steps there. But broadly speaking, I think it's important to note for any critics and any lawsuits that Title 42 is a public health directive. It's not an immigration, migration enforcement measure, and the decision on when to lift Title 42 was made by the CDC. And our objective from here, and this is why we have the implementation period over the next several weeks, continues to be to ensure we are increasing our resources, surging personnel and resources to the border, improving border processing, implementing COVID-19 mitigation measures, and continuing to work with other countries in the Western Hemisphere to manage migration and address root causes. But this is, again, a healthcare measure, a health measure determination, and not an immigration policy.
So, Representative Grothman, that's the White House's justification of the action. What do you think?
Well, like I said, we had more people dying of COVID today than we did last June or July. So I think that's kind of lame to say that that's the reason why we have to get rid of it now. I quite frankly think one of the reasons they're trying to get rid of it now is we have the carnage going on in Ukraine every day, and it's a way for them to dramatically increase the amount of illegal immigration and have the press not pay attention because they're paying attention to Ukraine. I think if they try to do something like this a year ago, when quite frankly COVID wasn't the biggest deal, they wouldn't have got away with it because the newspapers and all news outlets would have been inundated with this stuff. But because of what's going on in Ukraine, they think they can increase the number of people coming through here by, say, a factor of 4, factor of 3, something like that, and that nobody will notice.
One of the topics related to Ukraine that has come up in recent days was the president's budget request, money for Ukraine, a top figure of $5.8 trillion. As a budget person yourself, what do you think of the request?
Well, overall in the budget, it's too great. The big thing in the budget is non-defense spending, which is up like 12%, which is obviously out of line. Given that When you look at the inflation is caused by excessive spending. The Fed has to print dollars to cover it. And when you're going with non-defense discretionary over 12%, it's just throwing gasoline on the fire. Not to mention some of the things they're spending money on. The Biden administration does want to put more money on the border. They want to hire more people to monitor the Border Patrol. It's kind of like when they look at a city like Washington, D.C. or Milwaukee, where I'm from, and you see this huge increase in murders, you blame the police. They see this huge increase in the number of people coming across the border, and the Biden administration says, let's hire more people to make sure the Border Patrol is not doing anything wrong.
Representative Grothman, part of the budget, $800 billion slated for national security. Some critics of that figure as well, but what do you think of that amount of spending when it comes to national security issues?
Well, that's a very small increase compared to other parts of the budget. And national security, I don't care whether you're talking at the border, I don't care whether you're talking about national defense. Obviously, we have a bigger crisis at the border than any time in my lifetime. And as far as national defense, I think it's tragic. But I think in the last year here under President Biden, our relations with both Russia and China have never been worse.
Do you think that will impact, or that number will go up? And particularly, do you think the budget for the Defense Department will go up because of those concerns, the larger concerns of national security, because of what we're seeing in Russia and Ukraine?
Well, I think it'll go up because obviously some of America's weapons have been sent to Europe. They're going to want to replace those. And so I would expect that as time goes on and it works its way through the process, that number will go up. I do think sometimes we spend money in areas in national defense that are not necessary, and hopefully they'll be frugal and look at those things. But like I said, overall, I think because what's going on in the Ukraine, we're going to have to buy more things like javelins, stingers, that sort of thing.
What do you think about the money we're spending on Ukraine? I mentioned what was in the defense budget, the president saying more budget, or last week saying that money was going to go directly to their budget. What do you think of the overall spending on Ukraine as far as the United States is concerned?
I think right now we're getting a lot of money to Ukraine. Obviously, if they're going to have to put in more, they're going to have to put in more. But as far as the initial amount of money that went to the Ukraine in last year's budget or the omnibus bill that we talk about, I thought it was adequate.
Let's hear from Bill, Athens, Texas. Line for Democrats. You're on with our guest, Representative Glenn Grothman of Wisconsin. Bill, go ahead.
Good morning. I'm from Athens, Texas, and I was just wondering how you feel about the Eastern European countries' response to their refugees coming in. Looked like they welcomed them in with open arms. And
well, they did, but I think unlike the refugees we have coming across our southern border, they anticipate the refugees coming to Poland are going to return to Ukraine as soon as this war is over. They do not view these as a permanent state of affairs, unlike what's going on in our southern border. Everybody who comes here, almost everybody who comes here, wants to make it a permanent lifetime move.
That is a really good point that I have not heard before.
Talk to our guest, 202-748-8001 for Republicans, 202-748-8000 for Democrats, and 202-748.
We're on the precipice. If the war in Ukraine continues any further west, we'll be on the precipice of one of the largest mass migrations in a long time. Like, we're talking like a bigger migrant issue than in Syria. Like, that was like 1.2 million, 1.5 million people over the course of like a year or two. And then this is all, we've already exceeded that in like a month. And now we're thinking we might even be displacing more people if this escalates.
8,002 for independents. Representative, it's on the Senate side, but apparently a deal in the works specifically for COVID spending, $10 billion figure for tests and the like. What do you think about that effort as far as more spending specifically to COVID, a request from the White House for that?
Well, like I said, it's not over, although it's interesting that they want to spend more on COVID than already. And at the same time, they're saying this is over and we can open up the border. That's my comment there. It shows the hypocrisy in the Biden administration. And it shows that even they themselves believe the COVID pandemic is not over. If it's still big enough to have these new appropriations, why in the world are we opening the border to many people, many of which probably have the COVID?
Well, back to the COVID spending, some of it will be reclaimed from other parts. Do you think that's a good strategy?
Dude, why does this guy have some good takes?
Absolutely. There's a lot of money that's been put out there that hasn't been spent yet. Absolutely. We ought to be reclaiming funds that have been unspent.
Because, like, I'm a really, like, I'm pretty pro-immigration. I like lax immigration. I want people to come here legally, but I want the process to be also, like, pretty expedited. Because I feel like a lot of the things that people worry about, it's easier to track when people are already citizens. Like, if you're worried about people committing crimes, it's easier to track criminals when they have social securities, birth certificates, like all their paperwork's in order. But this guy's got like a pretty decent point. Why are you like asking for more of COVID money and COVID funding while at the same time trying to like relieve COVID restrictions? And I guess it's because this was a Trump policy and they don't necessarily agree with it. This new administration might not. But it's not going to make sense to everybody. So I kind of can see where this guy's coming from.
When it comes to money issues itself, back to the budget request for a second, a new proposal from the administration on a tax specifically gained to wealthy individuals. What do you think about this proposal, and what do you think it will do as far as raising revenue?
There are other things that we can do. And I will grant you, in some ways, there's certainly people in our country who should be paying more taxes than they are. And I think rather than having a whole new tax, which almost results in a kind of a property tax, I
believe the next guy that's going to talk about Title 42 is a Democrat, but like not 100%.
Corporations and wealthy individuals to get off without paying.
I just think it'd be interesting to see the other perspectives.
The interest deduction for hedge fund managers is an example of something that has been sitting there forever. I don't know why they don't go after it. I will say, by the way, as far as these tax increases in this proposal, if you really wanted to get a tax increase through, you do it through a process called reconciliation, which the Democrats were using when they try to get Build Back Better through. They are not putting the tax increases there. This budget is going to have to go through the Senate and get at least 10 Republicans to vote for it, which means to me the tax increases here are not a serious proposal. If you want to see what the Democrats really want, what they really want to do, and some of it was good stuff, look at the Build Back Better bill.
You have a background as a tax preparer and an estate planner.
That's interesting.
With that hat on for a second, as far as this new tax proposal, can the wealthy get around that particularly?
I think they have to do more to close gaps. I mean, tax lawyers are very ingenious people. And
I really acknowledge, like, I'm just going to stop it for a second just to say I really appreciate this dude's criticisms because, like, he's keeping his critiques really grounded and very focused on like material conditions rather than like trying to create an ideological like spin on like an ideological narrative either direction. You know, like he's not propping the Democrats up as a woke leftist agenda. He's not propping his own stuff as like defending, you know, he's not pushing those like things right now. He's like, this is very like, I really appreciate like how down to earth this is.
And I haven't seen the individual language. I think there are a lot of ways that people are getting around the tax code that at the time Congress passed those bills, they didn't see it. But I think, quite frankly, a lot of the tax lawyers in New York are a little bit more on the ball than the average congressman, and they find loopholes that Congress did not intend.
Let's hear from a viewer in California. This is John on a Republican line for Representative Glenn Grothman. Go ahead.
Good morning, and I'd like to ask the representative a question. He's mentioned several times where he's thought Joe Biden has made mistakes or the wrong moves and why he doesn't understand the moves. And what I would like to know from the congressman is, do you think Joe Biden's being blackmailed because of Hunter Biden? Do you think Hunter Biden's overseas dealings have caused the China and Russia to blackmail Joe Biden into making bad decisions?
Well, obviously, President Biden's decisions are so horrible, you've got to wonder if he wants this country to survive, right? An open border, no country can stand that. The completely out of control spending, which puts
all right, now we're getting a little
of the dollar as the world.
Now we're stretching a little bit.
Currency at risk. The wild accusations of racism against this country in general and against the police in particular. You have to clearly, either he's being talked into something by the staffers around him, or he himself wants to ruin America. It's got to be one of the two things, because all those three issues, and his throwing more money at the welfare system, which is the way to discourage people from work, discourage traditional families. All these things are ways to destroy America, and it wouldn't be beyond their own possibility.
Man, I gave Glenn Grothman the benefit of the doubt for this conversation, and I immediately regret it.
Obviously, Hunter Biden, and given what they found on the laptop, perhaps Joe Biden himself were benefiting from their situation, their relationships with foreign countries. Why do foreign countries do this? Because they think they will buy, influence, or blackmail people, and it's something that I think we seriously have to look at. I really wish people in the Democrat Party would look at what happened with Hunter Biden and allow us to have hearings specifically on those issues.
I kind of wish that like people would explain what happened with Hunter Biden, because no one's really doing that. They're just like saying he made dealings with China and dealings with Russia and blah blah blah, and it's like, well, like dealings on whose behalf? Like, I just want to, like, someone needs to drop the nitty gritty details. I'm gonna find a video later today or something.
The American public should know if the president himself and certainly his son is compromised.
From Tony in Connecticut, Democrats line. You're next up. Hi.
Hey, good morning. I'm a longtime Democrat and voted for Obama, didn't vote for Trump, and voted for Biden. But I've been watching this Southern crisis for a while. I guess now it's a crisis, right? Has Mayorkas called it a crisis yet? But my thing is, a couple of years ago, I saw our congressman like AOC go down there and look at the dead bodies and babies floating in the river. Where is my Democrat people going down, and why aren't they going down there? Where is Kamala, and where is Joe? They can spend all the time around the world, but down in the southern border, people are dying. They show them in the rivers. Where are these people? Was it just because it was Trump they did this? And whatever happened to the investigation about supposedly people getting whipped by the horsemen? I have a friend that is into horses, and he said that was a lot of baloney. Thank you, sir.
Okay, that's
right.
totally
That was not true. That's the type of thing that you get on poorly run networks that just are concerned about making the Border Patrol look bad. And like I said, I think it's very disappointing in this budget proposal that, and the Build Back Better bill, that President Biden seems more focused on making sure the Border Patrol doesn't get out of line than all our illegal immigrants getting out of line. You are right. In addition to the sea of people flowing in this country, people die coming into the country. And if you have more Border Patrol agents, you can prevent that. Sometimes people die crossing the Rio Grande. Other people die just in the Arizona heat. And as long as you're having an open border and people think they can get here, you will continue to have people drowning in the Rio Grande. You'll continue to have people dehydrating to death in the Arizona desert.
Representative Grothman, because of your background on national security issues, we have a viewer who asks, this is Brad in Indianapolis, asking about the Department of Defense specifically, and what do you think of an annual audit of the DoD?
It'd be a very good idea. You know, when I was a child, I read a book talking about how some of the money going for defense was not even things the Defense Department wanted. They were maybe projects built in an important congressman's district, or maybe campaign contributions from defense contractors, that type of thing. I think we're naive to think that that practice has ended. I think that we're spending a lot of money on things. I sometimes worry about aircraft carriers, for example, that I think are very expensive, but in a real war wouldn't last long. And I think having a separate audit, particularly on building munitions, but across the board, would be a very good thing, and have impartial person look to see where we can spend a little bit less. And it's not just a matter of spending less, we're spending inappropriately. You know, we have to be ready right now more for cyber attacks, that sort of thing, than, you know, building weapons that may have been more appropriate in World War II.
I mean, that's like fair. We have a little bit of, we have a little bit of some inefficiency going on with our military just because of the sheer like nature of the military and its like ability to, like, it accounts for redundancy. That's probably what our military does best, is like we account for, or not redundancy, but like contingency. We account for about as many contingencies as possible. We always are like, what if this happens? Well, let's prepare for that. What if this happens? Well, let's prepare for that. Is this going to happen? It's unlikely, but There's still a chance. So let's have this in case that happens. Like, we're very good at logistics, and a little bit of it comes from just like, better to have it, not need it, than need it, not have it. And because of that, we have some like, you know, we have some battalions or whatever. We have some like units, you know, like tank units and stuff that are like really obsolete, and like it uses a lot of oil and stuff to maintain. And it's not like it's going to be like effectively used in combat anymore. And like we're slowly and surely decommissioning like our tank units, for example. But even so, we still have a lot of outdated military equipment laying around.
Tampa, Florida, Independent Line. Hi.
Yes, good morning, Pedro. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. You're on with our guest. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I would just like to understand from the congressman where everyone is talking about the southern border, and by Congress being as equally divided as it ever been, why can't, since they're so upset about what's going on at the border, why isn't him and the Republicans doing something to go and clean up the border instead of sitting complaining and talking about what Joe Biden is doing or not doing?
Really hard.
Why can't they just go? And also, when he talk about how racism is all over the other countries, looking at America is a racist country. Maybe if they quit displaying racism amongst their own people, then other people will view America as a better country.
Okay.
But when you got this,
that's Ken in Florida.
Well, I guess he brought up two things. First of all, as far as his racism charge against America, I've been down on the border, and you're having people come here from all over the world. Now, we don't want people to come here illegally, but I've been down there. I've been at ceremonies in which new people are sworn in. You get a lot of people from India, Pakistan area, from Southeast and Northeast Asia, from Latin America, from Africa, all coming here and all succeeding, I might add. In my area, we have a lot of Hmong, you know, the folks who helped us fight in the Vietnam War. They're doing a tremendous job. Despite coming here not even knowing the language. So I think if people can't make it in America, I think rather than scream racism, they ought to look at themselves, because people are coming from all over the world and succeeding. As far as what we can do other than complain, Congress can appropriate funds, but as far as how the border itself is being run, that's up to the executive branch. That's why we elect the president. Now, you could say the president has too much power, but I have staff here, about 14 staff, who answer questions and deal with what's going on in the 6th Congressional District. But the purpose of my staff is not to go down to the border and try to tackle people coming across. That's not what Congress is for. Hopefully, we got a majority in November, and at that time, we'll be able to hire more Border Patrol agents. Hopefully we can cut a deal with the Biden administration. But if we're going down the path of the 500,000 people maybe coming here every month, we're going to be so far behind even by the time the November election rolls around. And even then, we've got to cut a deal with the Biden administration, and his borderland security folks don't really seem to view unlimited people coming here as a problem. One other thing I like to point out that I like to tell people, last time I was down there was a path, and on the path, it was littered with photo IDs of people coming here from around the world. Chile, Colombia, Brazil, Costa Rica, wherever.
That's not around the world. That's all Latin America.
Photo IDs before they check in with the Border Patrol. The only reason they get rid of them is because they want to start a new life, and they don't want the Border Patrol to know their real names. So to me, that gives you an idea of the problems we're going to have with some of these people.
Or maybe their guide made them throw it away.
Workers working in agricultural sectors. Is that?
It's so hard. Like, that's so weird to say. It's so, like, from this point on, any single person that tries to pin malicious intent on a vague, like, group of, like, people trying to cross the border, I'm saying fuck that, all right? You're going to give them the doubt. I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt, okay? Like, why there? If this story is true, if there's just photo IDs littered everywhere, why would you think, like, if they thought it was, like, they brought it this far, they brought it over they brought it miles through the desert. Okay, they brought it this far. The reason that, like, why would they throw it away now? Okay, why would they throw it away now? They probably were told by somebody, like their guide, like guides who are not trustworthy people, who are just random people who go, oh yeah, American government, they're cool now, bro. They're cool. You hear this in, you hear this in Colombia. You hear this in Honduras. You don't hear this. You don't hear this like in a place where you're like things are secure. You're already in a place where anything is better than this. And now somebody's telling you America's nice. We got a new president. He's lifting restrictions. Come and we can start a new life. And that's what these people do. They go, oh wow, okay, yeah, anything's better than this. Let's do it. Let's take the risk. They think about it. They take the risk. They make the choice. They choose to trust this person, and then this person abandons them. They tend to. That's what tends to happen. They tend to get scammed. These people who are trying to cross the border, they tend to get scammed one way or another. Whether it's whether it's like, I'm just gonna take all your shit and abandon you in the desert, or I'm gonna or I'm gonna like put a bunch of like drugs in your bags and stuff like that, and so like we're gonna cross the border and you're gonna smuggle this shit for me, or like, yeah. So I mean, there's plenty of situations like that, and like there's plenty. I'm sure that if they're trying to be like, all right, I'm gonna make you smuggle this into the border. Here's this bag of cocaine or whatever. They're probably gonna make them take their photo ID and throw it to the ground. Like if they're gonna actually put them into that shitty position, they're gonna definitely make them throw that stuff away too, because it's a paper trail to them. It's a paper trail to the guide. So you really need, it's like, as much as I want to believe that there are some like ne'er-do-wells or whatever putting our country at risk at the border, I feel like it's a lot of people just getting ripped off and scammed and like getting exploited from one bad situation to the next.
Will that impact also the dairy sector, say, of Wisconsin as far as immigrant labor is concerned?
Well, we have programs to get people here temporarily, more for California. Dairy is a little bit of a different thing. We have to do something specific for dairy because dairy is year-round, right? And a lot of the people who come here on visas, they come here temporarily, particularly in California, the fruits, vegetables, that sort of thing. Whereas dairy, you got to milk a cow every day. So our system is not really built to help dairy the way we're helping other farming.
Would you say then undocumented labor is not an issue as far as the dairy industry is concerned?
Oh, no, it's a problem. It's always going to be a problem because you're getting people here who aren't vetted. I mean, that's just it. We ought to know the names of everybody's coming here. We ought to know where they are, and they ought to be appropriately vetted. And a problem we're having with the Biden administration is not only are we letting so many people here, but we're kicking out far more people. We used to deport factor 4 or 5 times as many people under Trump. People are committing crimes in this country, and a few are being deported, but nowhere near as many under Donald Trump. So we both have more people coming here and less people breaking the law are kicked out.
Representative, you're part of an effort known as the Member Financial Transparency Act. What is that?
Well, we're going to try to accelerate when congressmen who buy and sell stocks have to let the public know. There are allegations which I share in which a lot of congressmen are buying and selling stock more than I think is appropriate because it certainly raises suspicions. We're going to raise or lower to 7 days the number of days that a congressman has when they buy new stock or sell stock before it's made available to the public. We like to think by doing that, the congressman will be paying a little more attention. Just a tip for my friends, I obviously have a big 401k like so many people in our society today. I largely put my money in big mutual funds, Standard & Poor's 500 index fund or something like that, which quite frankly, they'll tell you is a better thing to put your money in. And furthermore, you're not going to be subject to criticisms in that you're voting such and such a way or you're buying such a stock because of information you learned in Congress.
Let's hear from Patty. Patty in Atlantic City, New Jersey, Independent Line.
Good morning, and thank you for taking my call. I'm an independent voter, and I have a comment and a question. My comment is that I call the Republican congressman in New Jersey, and I don't get a return phone call. So what I want to say is that I feel that the Republican Congress, to me, and I'm an independent voter, I vote both Democrat and Republican, but I feel that the Republican Congress this day is a disgrace. The way, if the only goal you seem to have is just to bash the Biden administration, and it's very insulting. And I just want to say that we independents just want to get you guys to get things done there. You're constantly fighting, and you have to work from the middle to get something done. And that's my comment. My question is, you mentioned Hunter Biden. First of all, I thought that children or adult children of presidents were off base, but I guess for the Republicans, nothing is. But my question is, what about the Ivanka and Jared Trump, who made millions and millions of dollars from their business and copyrights while they were working in the White House?
Okay.
Don't you think that is a conflict of interest?
Okay, Patty in New Jersey. Thank you.
You dealt with a variety of issues there. First of all, when people say we should just get along, I want you to look at the position of the Biden administration and see whether it's something you can compromise with. When the Biden administration openly talks about having hundreds of thousands of people come in this country every month, not vetted, I think that's an extreme position. Okay, we'd be happy to work on some sort of immigration bill, but when your position is we're going to let the parts of a new wall just rust or be stolen in the Arizona desert, and on the other hand, we're letting all these people come.
Oh, why,
a moderate
dude?
position.
You know, it's like when people are like, oh, let's renew energy, let's make windmills and solar panels, and then the guy's like, no, bro, why don't we just do nuclear? Like, this is the same thing with the wall. Everyone's like, why don't we just build a wall? And it's like, bro, like let's and not just any wall, okay? We need a physical barrier. We need a line in the sand. We need concrete 8 feet high, 12 feet high, you know? When you could install a row, like a field of cameras, like you could basically create a surveillance border and then use border agents to verify those locations. And like, you know, it's like basically if we spent just as much money into developing the infrastructure to develop like a cyber line down that row, and then like you just have, you know, cameras all around that bitch, and then they pick up, see people crossing, and border security comes and they wrap them up. Like, that should be, like, that sounds way more efficient and way more effective, and I think that's what, like, Biden is actually opting to do. But, like, everyone is so hell-bent on, it needs to be a wall, it needs to be 12 foot of concrete in the air. Like, god damn.
When you're talking about new bills worth trillions of dollars like Build Back Better, that's not something you negotiate off of. The reason we have all this inflation is because we're spending too much money. Now, I'd be happy to work with the Biden administration and find areas where we can cut a little bit together. But if the Biden administration says, let's get together and increase spending another 12% a year, that again does not lend itself to a moderate position. Okay, we have a welfare system in this country that continues to attract more and more people to that lifestyle. When the Biden administration, rather than cut back or find ways to have less people adapt the welfare lifestyle, instead throw more money at it, again, where's the compromise?
If we could represent one more call. This is a viewer from Appleton, Wisconsin. This is Alan, Democrats line for you. Go ahead, Alan.
Thanks, C-SPAN, and thanks, Congressman. Just had a question. There are reports you give an immigrant a spending card or we give them room and board. What exactly do we give immigrants, and where does that money come from for these planes that are flying them or these buses that are contracted? Thank you.
We appropriate the money. A lot of times nonprofit organizations are in charge of taking care of these people. Catholic Social Service is a big one, but there are others as well. It does hit me is that they, in many ways, are living more lavishly than some of our own poor Americans. And that's obviously a problem. We talked about before in Build Back Better. Joe Biden is trying to do all he possibly can to give free college to illegal immigrants. I think that's out of control. We heard during the campaign his goal of giving free health care to illegal immigrants. When Americans have big deductibles and are weighing, should I go to the doctor, should I not? Immigrants don't have to go through that. So I think the only reason I can think why Joe Biden does this, and of course he's the one who has to propose and sign off on all the spending, I think he does it because he wants to attract still more illegal immigrants here. I mean, if you're sitting in wherever, Venezuela, and the medical system is what it is down there, and you want top flight medical care, isn't that an inducement to come here? I think it is. And we'll fly people all over the country without even a photo ID. I told you, these people are getting rid of their photo IDs. If you or I get on an airplane, we have to show a photo ID. If you're a legal immigrant, you just say, I want to go to Portland, Oregon, whoosh. No photo ID, we don't care. We'll take you to Portland, Oregon. So it's frustrating the degree to which they are so desperate for more illegal immigrants here that materially illegal immigrants are given things, or the Biden administration wants to give them things that are not available to the average American.
Representative Glenn Grothman, Republican of Wisconsin, serves on the Oversight and Reform Committee and the Budget Committees. Thanks for your time.
Glad to be on the show.
We'll talk more about Title 42 with a guest from the Migration Policy Institute, the senior fellow Muzaffar Chishti. He'll talk and give his perspective on the Biden administration's decision on Title 42. But for the next half hour, open forum if you want to call 202-748-8001 for Republicans, 202-748-8000 for Democrats, and Independents, 202-748.
Dude was talking about index funds, and it got me looking at my stuff. I'm going to do this one.
Journal continues.
Muzaffar Chishti is the senior fellow with the Migration Policy Institute, here to talk about the decision by the Biden administration on Title 42. Thank you for giving us your time today.
Thank you so much for having me.
If we could start telling our viewers about the Migration Policy Institute, what is it and who financially backs it?
Migration Policy Institute is a DC-based think tank. We are about 21 years old, and it's a think tank that focuses exclusively on immigration and refugee policies. We have an office in Brussels, which looks at European migration. We follow migration in Latin America through more of a presence there. And so it's a global think tank exclusively dedicated to immigration and refugee issues. We are almost exclusively funded by foundations in the philanthropic sector.
Mr. Chishti, then, when it comes to policy with migration and refugees and the like you talked about, Title 42 being rescinded by the Biden administration, or at least the decision to do that in the next couple of weeks. What do you think about that decision?
Well, it was a decision which was coming for a long time. It was becoming increasingly difficult to justify the Title 42, which essentially barred anyone from entering at the border. The government had the ability to expel people without giving them any hearing, even for an asylum. It was put in place by the Trump administration, and it was continued by the Biden administration since the policy was put in place in May of 2020. And the health arguments for it were now becoming increasingly indefensible because the COVID situation in the country has changed, and also that we have changed the rules of engagement with respect to people who are traveling from other parts of the country through ports of entry, like at our airports and at border crossings, because we had now decided that anyone who's vaccinated can enter the US. So even vaccinated people were not allowed at the border. So that was becoming, on health grounds, quite indefensible now.
And so was one of the problems that you couldn't apply Title 42 uniformly to people at the border or wherever they were coming from?
Yeah, it applied to places between the ports of entry. So these were sort of normally where people would do illegal crossings, and so it applied to those areas of the border.
What when the border now that it was in place and now about to be rescinded, how many expulsions took place under the policy?
So 1.7 million people were expelled, or 1.7 expulsions took place, and you should know that some of them may actually have been the same people expelled a few times over. So the total expulsions were 1.7, 1.2 million of those happened in the Biden administration, 0.5 million happened during the Trump administration.
And so then with that involved, was this families, were these single people? How would you break down those that eventually were expelled?
That's a good question. So it was not uniformly applied. The children were exempted. If you're an unaccompanied child, they were exempted very early on by a court decision. So neither the Trump or the Biden administration expelled children. It expelled some families, but not all. So it frequently applied to single adults, whether they were from Mexico or Central America, and in some cases from other countries also. So the brunt was felt by single adults, but it also applied occasionally to families.
I was going to then ask you, when it comes to those that were expelled, were these mainly people from Mexico? Were they outside of Mexico? What would be the breakdown in a rough manner?
The breakdown, it was mostly with respect to Mexicans. After that, it was Central Americans. And then this is the Northern Triangle countries of El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras. And then we talk about countries beyond the Northern Triangle and Mexico. And it was applied to those countries also, not always uniformly. It was applied to Haiti and Ecuador. They were the two highest non-Central American and Mexican countries which experienced expulsions, but it was applied to Brazilians and Venezuelans and others also. It frequently depended on which citizens of what countries Mexico would accept back when they were expelled. So unless we had the ability to expel those people to countries of their origin by planes, it was harder to send them to Mexico unless you were Mexican or Central American.
Muzaffer Chishti is our guest until 9 o'clock to talk about Title 42. And if you want to ask him questions, it's 202-748-8001 for Republicans, 202-748-8000 for Democrats, Independents, 202-748-8002. If you want to text us your thoughts, excuse me, 202-748-8003. Mr. Chishti, you've probably heard Republican concerns now that Title 42 being removed. What happens as far as surging at the border or people coming there? Are these legitimate concerns?
Of course, they're legitimate concerns. We have had, significant number of migrants coming at the border for the last many years. Even during the pandemic, obviously, people kept on coming. This is the administration is expecting that there's going to be an increased flow at the border, but this policy is not going to go into effect. That means it's not going to be formally rescinded till the end of May. So they're giving themselves 2 months to put in place a system which would at least respond to some aspects of the flows, which is both creating reception centers at the border and also putting in place a new asylum rule, which would take off some of the pressure that is expected when the policy is fully lifted.
One of the comments leading up to the decision, this came from Senator Mark Kelly, Democratic senator from Arizona. He wrote this in a press release saying, "This is the wrong decision. It's unacceptable to end Title 42 without a plan and coordination in place to ensure a secure, orderly, and humane process at the border. From my numerous visits to the southern border and conversations with Arizona's law enforcement, community leaders, mayors, and nonprofits, it's clear that this administration's lack of a plan to deal with this crisis will further strain our border communities." Again, this is a Democratic senator from Arizona, but what do you think about those concerns he's laying out?
Well, I think the concerns are valid. But I think it's not fair to say that the administration has no plan. It does have a plan, both in the U.S. and actually with respect to the engagement of other countries. And we can go a little more into that. It is putting in place a more systematic response in terms of a coordinated, a multi-agency response, including DHS, including FEMA in planning for how to receive people if there's a big surge. And it is working with Mexico and other parties in the region, whether it's Costa Rica, it's Panama, it's even in the 3 countries of Central America from which we get big flows. So that there is certainly a much more of a systematic plan in place than the administration, I think, gets credit for. Well, how effective that's going to be, we don't know. But I don't think we can say that there's no plan.
The Homeland Security Secretary said in a statement a couple of days ago that once Title 42 is lifted, the proceedings under Title 8 still would continue. If that's the case, what's the course of action under that for those at the border and those who would want to gain entry to the country?
So Title 8 is the traditional immigration framework under which we admit people. This was the law before Title 42 was put in place. Under that, anyone who has arrived is still put in what we call expedited removal, that they could be just removed in a very short time in a U-turn if they have no basis to enter the United States. So in that regard, it takes a little longer. It takes 90 minutes. It takes 15 minutes to put someone in those removal proceedings, but you could still make a U-turn for people to return to Mexico. The difference is with respect to people who express fear of persecution upon return to their countries. They have to be under Title 8, be given an opportunity to express that fear. We call that credible fear determination. It goes before an asylum officer to see whether the person just passes the basic threshold test, whether they could have fear or not. And that then goes into, if they pass the test, then they're scheduled for a hearing before an immigration judge. That is what's going to happen under Title 8 when we return back to the pre-Title 42 world of immigration.
Again, our guest with us, and if you want to ask questions, do so up until 9 o'clock. We'll start with Brian. Brian in Michigan, Independent Line. You're on with our guest, Muzaffar Chishti of the Migration Policy Institute. Go ahead with your question or comment.
All right, thanks. And you can hear me, Pedro?
You're on. Go ahead, yes.
All right. Well, we never know at this end. Okay, here we go. Now, the United States is a sovereign nation. We wish to help the world. We're also a nation of laws. Here's the deal. We do not want anyone coming here that's breaking our laws. They need to go back to their own home, fix their own country. This is about respect. I respect all countries, including Mexico, Brazil, all of them. They all have the capacity to fix their own country. So when I hear UN initiative, this, that, and the other, the United States, we're at about 80 per square mile. Me as an American, I wish to remain near those numbers. I don't need Mexico's numbers where they're at about 140 per square mile or any other country. So why can't we just stay with sovereign nations? We will work together, but if you're going to come here, you're going to have to come here legally. We keep dealing with the same things from the 70s. The United States is a sovereign nation.
Okay, Brian, you made those points. We'll let our guest respond.
It's a perfectly valid question, and you're absolutely right. We are a sovereign nation, and part of the sovereignty is to defend and protect our laws. You're absolutely right. We are a nation of laws, and we operate under the immigration laws. It is also a part of our law that anyone who has expressed a fear of persecution in their country of origin, they have to be given a hearing, that they cannot be removed to that country where they face persecution. It's part of our domestic law. It also is part of the international law that we inherited from for a convention. So this screening that happens at the border is basically consistent with our obligations under both domestic law and under international law. And people who don't meet the criteria of that law are removed. That's how the system is supposed to work. Now, the point that our caller rightly makes, that people should come legally. most people would like to come legally. I think we should assume that people don't choose to come illegally. It just also happens that our immigration laws have not been changed for good 35 years. And because of that, the legal channels for people to enter the United States have become narrower and narrower. So we may actually need more workers in certain sections of our labor market. But the legal pathways for people to come are so narrow that it really they don't really meet the demands of the labor market. So many people then choose to come illegally, which is what we call our broken immigration system, and that needs to be fixed. And unfortunately, only Congress can fix that. President Trump couldn't fix that, and President Biden can't fix that either. That challenge goes squarely to Congress, which has remained polarized and therefore paralyzed on the immigration issue for the last 22 years.
We'll hear from Stephanie in Tennessee, independent line.
The last 22 years.
Hello, sir. How are you this morning?
Thank you.
Stephanie, you're on. Go ahead, please.
Can you all hear me?
Yes, you're on. Go ahead.
I have one question concerning this 42 immigration policy. I'm not big in politics here. I'm just studying. Now, if they come in, like the border is wide open now, why ain't we getting rid of the ones here that's illegal instead of, letting more in?
What?
That's my question.
Well,
okay. Stephanie in Tennessee, thank you.
Again, the people who are here illegally, if we do, there are about 11 million people in the country who have stayed here, either who entered the country illegally or entered legally and then stayed on beyond their authorized stay. This is what we call our unauthorized population. There are about 11 million of them. Now, to say that we can deport 11 million people is much easier said than done. We certainly don't have the moral will because it's extricating people from their homes who have had long residences, frequently have US-born kids, and are actually working in parts of our economy where we need their labor. So it's not easy to say that let's just pick up 11 million people and remove them from the country. We don't have the moral will, we don't have the political will, and we certainly don't have the resources to deport 11 million people. What we do is that we have certain amount of prosecutorial discretion, is that people who have committed crimes are picked up, and if they're picked up by ICE or even by local law enforcement authorities, in many cases, they are put in proceedings, given their chance to defend themselves under a law, because we're a country of laws. And at the end of that, if they don't pass the requirements of law, they are removed. So we're not actually shielding people from removal. We just cannot remove all 11 million people at the same time. And these people that are coming to the border today, we also don't let them in unless they, under our existing law, can establish to an asylum officer that they are facing persecution in their countries. And we have then the obligation to give them a hearing under both our domestic law and international law, because we are a country of laws.
Mr. Tishy, we've heard then about those hearings, things associated with the backlog of those hearings. Has anything been done substantially to reduce that backlog?
Yes, we are doing, the administration is doing a couple of things about the backlog. First, there are about pretty close to 1.7 million people in the backlogs, which is again part of our broken system. That doesn't make any sense. That, we now have these clogged arteries in all parts of our immigration system. 1.7 million people waiting just to be heard doesn't make sense. We obviously have to do better. So the administration is doing two things. One, it is establishing priorities even among those 1.7 million people. It's asking, actually issued a directive yesterday to ICE attorneys, look through the backlog and see which cases really deserve to be heard quickly and which really do not deserve to be heard as quickly. Let's put them in the back of the line, and process cases that really deserve to be heard more quickly. That's, I think, their first policy. Second is that the whole system of asylum at the border now is going to change. This is a new asylum rule. The interim rule went into effect end of March. It was issued end of March. It's going to be effective 2 months from then. which will take away the initial processing of asylum cases from immigration judges, which are backlogged in these 1.7 million cases, and ask asylum officers instead to hear those cases. We think that's a huge improvement because it's much less labor intensive and less adversarial to do a hearing before an asylum officer, and the immigration courts are so backlogged they need a break. So the combination of these two things, we think, is beginning to address some of the issues of the backlogged immigration courts.
Let's hear from Cheryl. She's in Ohio, Independent Line.
Good morning. I just wanted to say, number one, I disagree that we cannot afford to send them back. If we can afford to send them throughout our nation, we can afford to send them back. And secondly, I think that the reason that they're allowing all of these illegals in is the fact that they want to change our Constitution and make it allow the illegals to vote, and the fact that the Democrats are letting them in, that they're hoping that they will all vote Democrat. That's my...
Oh, thank you, caller. I appreciate
so,
it.
like...
Well, their number...
At least people from Mexico, like Hispanic communities, tend to be more conservative than non-Hispanic communities. Like... I'm just not gonna. I'm just gonna let it go.
First of all, that the Democrats are letting them in, or Republicans are letting them in. You know, this is a completely bipartisan issue. The Trump administration was, as probably all of us know, was one of the administration's strongest on immigration. You could say that President Trump actually campaigned on the issue of immigration and may have even won the election on the basis of immigration, and then he kept his promise about having immigration as the hallmark of his presidency throughout 4 years. But the fact is that we had the highest number of apprehensions at the border during the Trump administration in fiscal year 19 and fiscal year 20. We have had surges in immigration in all administrations. We had a big surge in 2014, we had a big surge in 2019, and we are about to have a big surge now. So this is not a Republican versus Democratic administration issue. Border is a very complicated phenomenon. There are too many forces that lead people to come, and sometimes they are in big surges, and then sometimes they are more of a trickle or a more managed phenomenon. So both Democrats and Republicans have struggled with it. On the issue of, do we have resources to pick up 11 million people? Not really, because you can't just physically pick up 11 million people and deport them. We have to go through a process. We have to apprehend them. We have to know where they are. Then we have to put them in a proceeding. And those things are time consuming, and they are expensive. So, and not to mention that these are some of the people who are important members contributing to our community, both as family members and as workforce. So that has a cost. I mean, just imagine the kind of
it's raining outside
that we got used to seeing during the pandemic. People who are harvesting our food, people who are making our food, people who are delivering our food, people who are taking care of us in the hospitals, people who are caring of elder people in nursing homes, people who are doing elder care these days. A large number of these are immigrant workers. Our society as we know it, as our economy as we understand today, would have huge impact if we expelled all 11 million people. So as a society, we have to confront all those issues when we make a decision about expelling people. Now, the last point your caller made is about the Constitution. First of all, there is absolutely no credence to any belief that Democrats want to make the Constitution to allow illegals to vote. That is just not possible. It's not possible under our laws. It's not possible under our Constitution. And one has heard no whimper of a thought that Democrats are interested in allowing illegals to continue. So those are, I think, people at some level are emotional about these things, But the rational analysis of it suggests that that's not what is happening, both in terms of the motivations of people entering and in terms of the motivations of lawmakers and our administration, how they respond to it.
This is Victor in Massachusetts, Democrats line.
Good morning, Pedro.
Good morning. You're on with our guest. Go ahead, please.
My question is, I'm Puerto Rican American, so that means I'm American because the United States government says so, and also because I am descendant of Taino Indians, and I'm a United States Marine Corps veteran. My question is, what is the definition of an immigrant? Because my understanding, an immigrant is a person who comes out of a country, right? Meaning that whites, blacks, Hispanics, everybody who's not from the United States is an immigrant. I do not understand why we have to treat people different based on their color, not where they came from or who they descended from. Now, can you answer the definition of immigrants to me? Because, I mean, we are ruled by colonizers, if we look at it, and conquerors who conquered our countries. So can you give me the definition, please?
Okay, that's Victor in Massachusetts.
That's a really good question. This is the kind of stuff, law students spend a lot of time debating. The word immigrant actually is not used in our law at all. Our law strangely uses the word alien, which is why some people refer to people who entered the country illegally as illegal aliens. That word alien, your caller is absolutely right, has actually a kind of an imperialist background. The British Empire treated everyone who was not born on British soil or was not subject to the British Empire as aliens, because they thought they do not owe allegiance to the country. That's a vestige of a colonial rule. But the word alien actually should be removed from our laws, and I think President Biden actually has indicated that that's one of his goals. But right now, an immigrant is anyone, talking popularly speaking. As immigrant is someone who was not born in the United States. So a foreign-born person technically is an immigrant. And that foreign-born person ceases to be an immigrant under our law when they naturalize to become a U.S. citizen. So unless you are naturalized and you're foreign-born, you are considered an immigrant in the United States under our present application of the law.
Let's take one more call. This is from Ohio, Republican line. This will be John.
Okay. Hey, my question is in regards to, he has repeatedly said 11 million illegals in the country. And I've been hearing 11 million illegals in the country for 20 years. My question is,
11 million is a big number.
I believe there's only 11 million people, because there's got to be like 111 million, because they don't fill out the census forms.
That's a third of the country. The country has 310 million people. 111 million people is a third of the country. You would notice that. All right? Like, if a third of the country was from Mexico, all of our signs would have English-Spanish translations on them. You learning Spanish would just be a requirement. You wouldn't have oh, time to choose whatever language you want. You gotta have 4-year credit for your college application. No, dude. Fuck that. You would just be learning Spanish, because that means 1 in 3 people that live with you speak Spanish. That's what that means. It's 11 million. That's a pretty good number. If it's anything higher, it's gonna be within the thousands. And if it was something like 11.2 million, then they would say 11.2 million.
So, how can you say there's 11 million? Can you answer me that? Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a demographer, but I speak to demographers a lot. And it's one of these constant perplexing question: how could you tell us they're 11 million? So there are actually very sophisticated analysis done to come up with an estimate of the unauthorized population, and it actually the number of unauthorized people in the country actually went down for a couple of years during the recession. People stopped coming in the numbers that they had come before. So it doesn't always.
That's interesting to think about.
And how the demographers calculate, they look at the total population of the United States, which we all know demographers have a very good, accurate sense about how many people are there in the country. That's what census experts do. And then they subtract from that the number of people who have made legal entries to the United States, from naturalized citizens to green card holders to people who are here on non-immigrant visas like tourists and students. And the remainder is what they estimate to be the unauthorized population. It's a formula, it's a methodology that has been tested by many demographers. And I think the variation among various demographers on this number is very slim. It may vary between maybe 250,000 to 500,000 among various estimates. I have seen no estimates going to be to 100 million. That would be highly noticeable. And I think that's, people should not be concerned about that. All rational demographers put it somewhere between, 11 to 12 million people.
The website for the Migration Policy Institute is migrationpolicy.org. Muzaffar Kishti is the senior fellow with the Institute, and we thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you so much for having me and listening to callers.
What a great video.
Coming up, taking a look at the issue between Clarence Thomas and Ginny Thomas, the emails of Ginny Thomas, and a larger call for a code of conduct at the Supreme Court. Joining us for that discussion, Fix the Court's Executive Director, Gabe.
I wish I had time for that one. That sounds really interesting. But I have to go to school. That was such a good video on immigration. I'm going to copy and paste this and post it to my Facebook. Yeah, that's gonna be it for me. Wow, seriously, such a good video. I love getting to talk, or I love getting to hear from people who actually study this stuff and who work with people who are it's their jobs to study this stuff. So you're not just hearing conjecture, you're not just hearing hearsay, you're not just hearing random narratives, you're hearing the facts, you're hearing the data, and that's so cool to hear, at least for me anyway. Tune in later. Hopefully my day ends around 6 o'clock, 7 maybe Mountain Time, and we're gonna do, well, either one of two things is happening. Either I'm going to do a little Ukraine crash course history thing, or I'm going to get caught up in playing video games with my friends. So either way, stay tuned, hang out, enjoy the rest of your day. And I hope that you can do something to make your day better and improve your life a little bit.